Hello and welcome to CNBC-TV18.com presents a special episode on making India the biologics capital of the world in partnership with Cytiva. Well, we're talking about the overarching drivers of innovation in biopharma manufacturing and the rise of advanced manufacturing technologies. We've spoken about biosimilars, biotechnology, but with COVID-19 pandemic as the backdrop, we've seen a lot of development in the space of biopharmaceuticals. The entire COVID vaccine program in India and across the world has been one that gives us a lot of courage. It gives the industry a lot to look forward into the future on how newer technologies can be built in even on a shorter scale or a shorter time frame. If we talk about, I'm ARCHANA SHUKLA, and today we'll be talking about these and much more, and how India is positioned and what more needs to be done for it to become the biopharmaceutical capital. We'll talk about continuous manufacturing to improve scalability of these products, to facilitate time to market. We'll also talk about how the capital requirement can be lowered for this industry, operating costs, and how the quality can be enhanced. And to tie in all of this, how does the regulatory framework work now? Does it support? And what more needs to change and add there? And to take us through this conversation, I have a very esteemed panel with me today. Dr. Rakesh Mishra, Advisor RCGM, which is the Review Committee on Genetic Manipulation, which is under the Department of Biotechnology. Dr. BALAREDDY, he's the Head of Biologics Biosimilars at Hetero Drugs Limited. SAUMYA KRISHNA, Partner at Kearney. Dr. Sundar Ramanan, SVP, Biotherapeutic Strategic Operations at Just Evotech Biologics, and Francis Von PARYS, Vice President Commercial Asia Pacific at Cytiva. Gentlemen and SAUMYA, thank you so much for joining us here for this special conversation. Well, let me bring the first question to Dr. Rakesh Mishra. Sir, in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of back and forth and a lot of forward movement when it comes to development of biopharmaceuticals, both in India and globally. Whether we talk about COVID vaccines, whether we talk about the the monoclonal antibody drugs that are being developed now, or the other drug development, we've seen a lot of drugs being repurposed for use during COVID-19, and a lot of this has brought biopharmaceutical at the center of healthcare, at the center of pharmaceutical, and a center of innovation. At this point in time, if we look at the Indian biopharmaceutical space, do you think we are prepared? We have the ground and the capability to leap forward from this point on? Obviously, COVID vaccines have made that space, but what more needs to be done here?
We will need many improvements in our system to make it more efficient. For instance, if we can have dedicated laboratories where basic tests can be done so that we can very quickly estimate if the product is safe and so on, and it can be done even by a charge basis from the industry. But so there is no confusion about whether the setup is there or not, whether safety data that is presented is good or not. So we can take such innovative things and have a more technical and expert full-time people and not the part-time committees doing these things. So if we make Sabha, I'm sure these things are under consideration, because we know that healthcare industry is going to be driver for the economy, and biologics and all are the future. So I'm sure the system will take care of those things.
Okay. All right. Let me bring in the industry here. Dr. Sundar Ramanan, if I can bring my next question to you. Taking from what Dr. Mishra was pointing out about the support that the industry is getting on the biopharmaceutical space, what more, in your sense, the industry would need to be supported in the post-pandemic world when we talk about biopharmaceutical manufacturing and even, for that matter, development? What about clinical trial regulations? Do you see that now with the shorter time durations, now that we've experimented with abbreviated clinical trials, and the rolling reviews that the government went through, especially with the vaccine process, do you see that being taken forward, in the post-pandemic world as well?
It's an excellent question. So there's two parts to that question in terms of answer. One is, if you were to look at the multiple agencies involved that touches the drug approval process and regulations, there are multiple agencies involved, and each of them provide a very unique and valuable service to the society. Now, what will be very helpful is if we can harmonize all of them under one digital umbrella. For example, India is extremely strong in technology, and we should lever that and build on top of it. So we have a centralized, say, digital portal where most of the requirements are automated. For example, if you were to just simply look at, if you have all the data today and exclude pandemic, under normal circumstances, the regulatory process alone takes 500 plus days in India, right? The question is, what does each of those steps and the time involved in terms of enabling access to patient in terms of faster access is something that we need to ask, and we need to have a centralized portal.
Right. Okay, let me bring in Dr. BALAREDDY here into the conversation as well. Dr. BALAREDDY, in your sense, to bring in more R&D investments into the biopharmaceutical space, is there enough support in terms of policy requirements from the industry perspective, from the market perspective, or what more do you think the policies need to evolve, in what sense, to support the R&D investments here?
Yeah, great. So let me put it in two to three different ways. The point number one. So yes, of course, as a country, we have done a great amount of work in the last 1 year, especially during pandemic. A lot of decisions have been taken, and really they're yielding us a lot of fruitful results. But having said, there are a lot of additional things to be done as we want to go for a leap jump in our efforts to increase the R&D effort. The point number one. So the biggest thing is that we need to see that the talent has to be really made industry ready. It is not something we can expect overnight, but there should be a policy or a national policy on making a talent ready for the industry. The second point is creating services in the sense, for example, biopharma companies today still are importing the services, or we need to rely on a lot of laboratories in the US and Europe. This needs to be also, government needs to look into what kind of the services which country needs, which we can avoid importing in the first run. For example, high-end biological characterization of drugs, we still go for doing these such studies in the US and Europe. That can completely be avoided or can be minimized over a period of time. So there should be a national policy and creating such a kind of infrastructure in the first hand across the country, not just focusing in one of the cities or two. It should be a national policy, see that where all the clusters are there, we should be created. Just we create industrial parks. Along with the industrial parks, we need to create such a resources, such a laboratories of eminent excellence, which can guide the industry or support the industry, as Dr. Rakesh Mishra was also telling that.
Right. You set the stage for my next question to SAUMYA. SAUMYA, you recently come out with a report along with CII that kind of touches upon some of the points that Dr. BALAREDDY was making here. In terms of what more is required for the industry to bring in that R&D investment, but along with the investment, like he was pointing out, getting the talent, having the clusters together is also equally important. What, in your sense, where are we right now in this, and have you seen any sort of positive movement ahead on some of these points in India?
Start with 0.1 cents in every dollar raised globally in biopharma goes towards Indian organizations. And while funding for biopharma has grown 7x globally, in India it's only doubled in the last decade. And so we do have a problem that we need to open up funding and provide access to that risk capital. That is at the foundation. We've got a very robust and healthy startup ecosystem, and early stage startups are well funded by BIRAC, and a lot of work has been done towards this. But it's at that mid stage where a lot of funding dries up and people fall off the wagon. And because the size of investment between 100 and 250 million dollars with that long gestation period is what it is, we do need to do three things, in my opinion. The first is we need to provide Indian startups access to funding from foreign markets, provide visibility to global investors, and provide this visibility at a global scale. One source of equity funding is by establishing capital markets such as the NASDAQ in the United States, the alternate investment market in the UK. The second is to provide RLIs, like we've got PLIs, to provide RLIs so that we can move from being the pharmacy of the world to the laboratory of the world. And even within this, we could fix the short-term and long-term capital gains at 5% for angel or VC investors to attract investments in biopharma. This will open up that risk capital. The third is in terms of just BIRAC funding, while there is a standard sort of approach to 50 lakhs for the first 18 months, if we can have a customized or a tailor-made approach where we also focus on that mid-stage from the pilot to scale up, and some policy interventions can unlock that a lot.
Okay. Dr. Sundar Ramanan, would you want to come in here as a follow-up to what Soumya said? Where is the biopharmaceutical startup or this industry losing out on capital?
A couple of things actually pointed out by one of the speakers earlier. The gestation period in biotechnology is quite long, right? And so when the gestation period is long, an investor needs to have patience. The invested money is large, but the return is also quite large. If we can set up incentivize, like Soumya is saying, if we can incentivize with capital gain incentives and technology infrastructures, clusters, and we do need. I mean, I can tell you as one myself, many of us that have left India, we really want to be in India and contribute to the Indian story, right? So yeah, and if there's infrastructure, the timing is very ripe to come back. What all we need is infrastructure, clusters, and then open lab space. And then capital, access to capital, and then set them free, set these people free, and imagine the magic that's going to happen. Yeah.
Right. And in terms of, in terms of the manufacturing capability, once we have the innovation, India is also, the center for manufacturing of pharmaceuticals and biopharmaceuticals. Have we made some movement ahead on manufacturing on that count? Dr. Ramanan?
We have done quite a bit, but we have a lot of distance to cover. So let me be very specific. We have technology we use, but once we start manufacturing, we don't continue to invest in innovation in manufacturing. And that's something that we are very good in repeating over and over and over. But repeating is fine. But when the world is moving with the combination of capital equipment and cheap labor, right? We need to move from that concept to a labor that is highly skilled. So we need to, as pointed out by Dr. Reddy, we need to upskill our labor. We need to introduce robotics, and India has demonstrated beautifully that we can supply vaccines for the world and we can provide access.
Francis, would you want to come in and add to that point on biopharmaceutical manufacturing and the entire CDMOs in India, and what more, Philip, do we need to give them?
Yeah, well, I wanted to, first of all, reinforce the point on technology here and driving additional productivity through the adoption of what is increasingly more digital means to model processes, optimize them, make them more productive and efficient. That is clearly an area where the manufacturing infrastructure in India, but also beyond, can still make leaps and bounds of progress. And we feel like we have a responsibility to work with our customers to help them achieve that. And so it's one area of contribution where we feel we can play a role as a manufacturer in the ecosystem. Just to expand on your question on where can we do more. I wanted to hit on a few other points as well. We did in the summer earlier this year, we published a study which we did in collaboration with the Financial Times around the resilience of the biopharma ecosystem. And we compared input from experts around the world, more than 2,000 experts, including in India, and asked them to rate the resilience of their biopharma ecosystem in their country on 5 pillars. They include the resilience of the supply chain, the access to talents, the ecosystem on the R&D front, government policy, and then finally on manufacturing agility. So how quickly can the manufacturing infrastructure be redeployed for other purposes? And the pillar that came out the weakest for India is the access of talent. About 2/3 of our respondents in India told that the major challenge they face is access and recruiting talent. And so we do have to focus on collaborating on that front. We have done collaborations and we are working in a concept of what we call fast track centers, which offer training programs for the industry where we collaborate with our customers, collaborate with local governments and academic institutions to provide more access to expertise, to manufacturing experience, and bring new professionals into this industry. The growth of the industry needs so much more talent that bringing researchers back from outside of India will be a great initiative, but will not be sufficient. So we need to bring people up from academic institutions and from adjacent industries into this industry to justify the growth and add to the talent that we need for future purposes.
Okay. Let me bring in Dr. Mishra here. Are the Indian manufacturing capabilities actually ready to adapt to changing times?
I'll just very briefly answer your second question first, that whether we have capability to adapt to the last minute changes and improvements. The answer is yes, because technically, in fact, we have the capacity to, and which has been demonstrated, that we have been monitoring the genome surveillance of this virus on a more or less real-time basis as well as anybody else. And India has been able to come up with the variants and the information and distribution. Now we are even able to do from the sewage sampling the degree of infection and even the variants that are there around. So, and one good thing about this, all the modern bio actives and all, is that technology is very simple. And you can actually make now vaccine in 4 weeks, 6 weeks time, and the rest is then regulation and other aspects of it. So a simple answer is yes, there is a readiness, there is enough technology of that. The most important thing, as many speakers have pointed out, and that's what the first question you posed, is the interaction between academia and the industry, which we have been talking, that is correct. But I must say that we have not reached where we can be very proudly say that we have free interactions and a lot of interaction, or even appropriate level of interaction between the academic and industrial institutions. And a lot needs to be done there. We have to build a trust. We have to build a liking of academic faculty in academic organizations and industry, so that our best talent not only always gets channeled to academic institution, they also get excited and interested and go to the industry.
But just as I wrap this conversation, I'll quickly give 10 seconds to each participant to tell us what has been one interesting or positive development in the biopharmaceutical industry that you saw during the pandemic, which you would want to be continued in the post-pandemic world as well. I see Soumya nodding very nicely. Soumya, shall we start with you?
If I had 10 seconds, it's the fast regulatory approvals. Batches that took 25 to 40 days were approved in 5 to 10 days. More of that.
Okay, faster regulatory approvals. Dr. BALAREDDY?
I think I could see that the biotech industry, everyone got to know in the last 1 year what is the importance it does. And now it's the government and all our job to see that this can be leapfrog in a different policy matters and taking the policy decisions. So it's the right time, and there is no better time than this for us.
Okay, so keeping the biotechnology center stage going forward in the post-pandemic world as well. Dr. Ramanan, what would your bet be?
Countries and people that would have been apprehensive about new technology, for example, mRNA, we were able to adopt it while ensuring patient safety at the fastest possible speed. Right, so that's something. Adoption of technology in the soft science space at the rapid pace is something that we should take it forward.
Right. So shorter duration of time, but newer technology along with patient safety. Francis, what would your bet be on?
I think India has clearly demonstrated the strength of its R&D ecosystem and the collaboration between government, private partnerships, academic institutions has yielded extremely fast progress, which we are now at a stage of manufacturing 1 billion doses. And so that strength has really shown in the pandemic, and we should continue to build on that and take encouragement from it.
Absolutely. Dr. Mishra, the last word on the panel. What is it that you saw during the pandemic, positive development, which you would want in the post-pandemic world as well?
Indigenization has been one of the very, very encouraging thing, although we started it after a lot of difficulty, but our institutions and industry has demonstrated that we can do it. And now most of the diagnostic material that is required is indigenously made and has become very cheap.
Absolutely. All right, Dr. Mishra, Dr. SAUMYA KRISHNA, Dr. Ramanan, Dr. BALAREDDY, and Francis, thank you so much for taking our time.